Be with you. And I too want you to know, if you're a guest here today, thank you for coming. We love having guests, and every week we have a good number of them. So if you're among that number today, I trust you've been warmly welcomed and cared about. You can come back anytime. We're hoping that by next Saturday night you're thinking, those people weren't so strange. I'll give it a go again. So you're always welcome here. So thank you for coming. All right. Steve Harvey, Family Feud. Anybody watch it? Yeah, okay, well, I do. Those mindless programs that sometimes you watch, right? On the game show Family Feud, it's hosted, as I said, by Steve Harvey. Contestants, you probably know the drill, right? They are asked to guess how 100 people responded to a variety of survey questions. So I have an idea. Let's do one of those for just a minute here. I do need a volunteer, though. Anybody daring enough to walk up here? Why don't you come on up? Come on up. Here we go. Give her a hand. Thank you. I'm going to give you this microphone. I'm going to ask you just one survey question, all right? We'll see how we do. Share your name with everybody.
Hi, I'm Chris Biggie.
All right. You ready?
Sure.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to ask you actually a survey question that was actually a survey question in an episode back in 2012, okay? You ready for this? You'll see it on the screen, too. 100 people surveyed. They were asked the following question. When someone mentions the king, to whom might he or she be referring? What do you think?
Leader of a country.
Okay, the leader of the country. Let's see what our survey has, leader of the country. We got the, there we go. Get it up there. Leader of the country. Sorry, I had to be the buzzer. There wasn't. Oh, do you want to try another one? Do you want help her out? Elvis. Can we see Elvis on the survey? Hey, there you go. There you go. Give Chris a hand. And how many said Elvis? 84 plus Chris. All right. Thank you very much. Let's give her a hand as she takes a seat. But we've got some more work to do. What? Let's finish it out, right? There were four top answers. What do you think the second one was? LeBron James. Do we see LeBron James? Can somebody do the X? Right, okay. By the way, this was 2012. Oh, he was around 2012, so what am I saying? All right, let's see number 2. Hey, but how many people said God or Jesus out of 100? Oh, that doesn't bode well for Jesus, does it? All right, what do you think number 3 is? Michael Jackson? Let's try Michael Jackson. Is it up there? How about number 3? Martin Luther King. Come on, give him some props. How many said Martin Luther King? 5. Number 4, come on. There you go. How many said Burger King? How many? There were 4 hungry people said Burger King. All right, but look at that, 100 people. When someone refers to the king, 93 didn't think to say anything about Jesus. Yeah, how popular is that guy? Well, he was not necessarily popular. Not necessarily was he the most popular answer in the first century either. When the question was asked, who's the king? Maybe some said Herod. Maybe some referred to the emperor. But it wasn't necessarily the case that people would respond to that question as Jesus. Nonetheless, in a very, very short period of time, Jesus ascended to massive popularity, such that where he went, a crowd was always with him. Even if you just think about the episode when Jesus breaks the loaf and the fishes, right? They said there were 5,000 people. The way they numbered people was only by counting, sorry, ladies and children, only by counting the adult males. So if there's 5,000 adult males, do you think it was just a men's retreat on the hillside? No, they had their families there. So if there's 5,000 adults that are male, add the wives and children to that, you're easily looking at 10, 12, 15,000 people. That was the type of crowd that would gather around Jesus. He was massively popular. That's not to say that everybody in the crowds that would follow him would answer the question, who is the king? And they would say, Jesus. They certainly didn't say Burger King. But they followed him nonetheless. And they would hear him preach, and when he preached, they would even say, this man preaches with an authority we've never heard, and a wisdom that's profound. And then they'd see how he behaved, how he interacted with people. people who were sick, lame, hurting, and how he would perform miracles. This man has authority. He has an authority we've never seen. Well, Jesus is going around, especially the region of Galilee, and he's preaching about the kingdom. And if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the 4 soils. That was a message that Jesus gave. He was giving a parable to make a spiritual point. And basically it was this: the human heart is analogous to planting a seed in the soil. Everybody understood farming, right? And just as there are a variety of types of soils, some soils more receptive to the seed that's planted, some less receptive, so too is the human heart. Some hearts are very receptive to the message Jesus would give, that when he arrived on earth, he brought with him the kingdom of heaven, that he was the Son of God. That was the good news message that he brought. Some embraced that, others didn't. But Jesus would say this in that message: the ones who've genuinely embraced, been receptive to the truth of my identity, you'll know it because their lives will change. They'll follow whatever it is God instructs them to do. And so this theme of, if your heart's genuinely receptive to Jesus, it'll show forth in a changed lifestyle, that trickles through the rest of what we see in chapter 8. After Jesus gives the parable of the 4 soils, he talks about the parable of a lamp and a lampstand with the exact same message. So now we're going to pick up where we left off, Luke chapter 8, 19 to 21, and you'll see the same theme happen again. It says in verse 19, "Then Jesus' mother and brothers came to see him, but they couldn't get to him because of what? The crowd. Not 20 or 30, undoubtedly thousands. Verse 20, someone told Jesus, "Hey, Jesus, your mother and your brothers are standing outside." Obviously, in this case, Jesus was in a home, but there's a crowd around the house and a crowd in the house. He's standing outside, and they want to see you, Jesus. Look at verse 21. What does Jesus say? Listen, my mother and my brothers are all those who hear God's word and obey it. Wrong side of the bed? I mean, how did Jesus wake up that day? Well, Jesus' mother and brothers, they were trying to see him, perhaps because they believed Jesus was, overextending himself. Wherever he went, crowds went. He'd have to get on a boat or hike to the top of a mountain to get some time by himself. So why were they wanting to see Jesus? Perhaps Jesus' mother just was caring about her son. He is overdoing it. What we do know from other passages of Scripture that his family, his siblings, didn't believe that he was the Messiah early on in his ministry. Matter of fact, James and Jude, his 2 half-brothers, it wasn't until after the crucifixion and resurrection that the Scriptures tell us that they finally believed their brother was the Son of God. And then James and Jude became leaders of the Christian church in the 1st century. But back in this episode, back in this period of his ministry, they didn't believe he was the Messiah. So maybe they were going there thinking he's delusional. Let's at least save him from himself. We want to see our brother. Where is he? Can you tell him to come out? Well, Jesus doesn't come out, not to see them. Jesus says, listen, my mother, my brothers, those are the ones who hear God's word and they obey it. Now, I don't think that Jesus was so much giving commentary on his current relationship with his biological family. I think what he was doing is what we would all do. When you're making a particular point, and then something occurs that you can leverage to emphasize that point, you'll leverage it. And so he sticks with his theme. Listen, I'll tell you, my real brother and my real mother, those are the ones that follow my instruction. Being a part of the family of God isn't a bloodline issue. It's a heart receptivity issue. And if the heart has genuinely received the truth that I'm Messiah, you'll see the life change. And so that's what I'm expecting. So I don't think he's necessarily disrespecting his family, but he is making a very pointed message, and he's using them to do that. So Jesus spoke with authority. I mean, there he is right there. I mean, all of these parables, all of his messages, authority, 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 and wisdom. And people were awestruck by it. He knew who he was. He never backs down from the reality of who he was. He knew he came all the way from heaven to earth to proclaim one message, and that message never changed. Never changed. So what we find now in the rest of chapter 8 is that Jesus not only speaks with authority when he's delivering a message, he also behaves, he acts. He does things with authority and with power. And what we'll see Jesus express authority and power with respect to three different realms of life. Three different realms of life. And as we go through the rest of this passage, my friends, I desire that Jesus would speak to your heart. That we're not just storytelling here, but in the reality of what did occur in these three episodes that we'll see, these three realms, that you can find the Spirit of God this morning touching your heart and your life. So be receptive. Be open. Be open to the blessing and the encouragement he wants you to have as we look at the rest of this chapter. So three realms over which Jesus demonstrates authority. The first was Jesus demonstrates authority over the natural realm. Verse 22 of chapter 8 says, one day Jesus said to his disciples, hey, let's cross the other side of the lake. Let's go to the other side. So they got in the boat and they started out across the lake. Let me show you more of a current map. We love my maps, or I love maps, right? On the far left, you have the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea. You see Lebanon, Syria, the Golan Heights, and Israel. Right next to the Golan Heights there, you see the Sea of Galilee. It's sometimes called a lake, 13 miles in length, at its widest point, 9 miles. Most famously known as the Sea of Galilee. Let's go to a map out of biblical days, first century. You see Samaria, Syria, Galilee, the region of Galilee, and then the Sea of Galilee there. Let's go to the next map. It zooms in a teeny bit more, I think. There we go. You can see Capernaum at the top. That's where Jesus made his home base. Then it says to the right, about halfway down, Gergesa. That's where they were headed. When Jesus said, let's go to the other side, they went to that side. So they would, the route would be, you get in a boat and you drop down right through the E and the A of sea, and right when you're in between C and the word Galilee, you make a left-hand turn and you take the winds across to Gergesa. That's what Jesus meant when he said, let's go to the other side. So they got in the boat and they started out. Now it says in verse 23, as they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. Now, you can imagine if you've got thousands of people following you everywhere you go, it kind of gets, it wears you out. I know when I leave here, I just have crowds follow me all week long. I get tired. And, my security team has to push people away, and I finally make my way to my home, and I take a nap. Well, Jesus understands my dilemma. He had it in the first century as I do now. All right, call me corny. But Jesus, in fact, had it in spades, as we say, right? He settled down for a nap. He must have been tired. Obviously, he wouldn't take a nap. Have you ever been, you fly across country or out of the country, many, many time zones, you finally get to your destination? Doesn't matter how excited you are, man, you've got to take a nap. And it could be in the middle of the day. You'll sleep for 20 hours, 18 hours, 10 hours, right? Jet lag. Imagine that sort of weariness. I don't know if that's the type that he felt, but it sounds like he slept through a storm. He must have been tired. As they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. But soon a fierce storm came down on the lake. The boat was filling with water, and they were in real danger. Now, we've talked about this before. All along the border, the periphery of the Sea of Galilee, you've got predominantly, especially in the north and on the east and west sides and on the top, you've got these very high, steep mountain grades that go up to plateaus. They're divided by natural geographical valleys. But what happens is those valleys, as they come down toward the Sea of Galilee, they become geographical wind tunnels. Wind tunnels. And they pick up such a fierce ability to create a storm. As they talk about the storms, just like it describes here, the storms fall upon or come down upon. Right? This isn't the type of storm where you see a cloud off in the distance and it's getting closer and closer and closer and closer. You see the lightning and you feel the thunder, right? And it eventually comes over the sea. No, these are generated differently. They're generated by winds that begin far away from Galilee that actually come across the Mediterranean. And as it comes across the Mediterranean, and I forget the name of them, but it sounds like cyclone, the word they use. It dips into these valleys, and then it finds one place of escape right over the top of the Sea of Galilee, such that it drops upon them. And historically, we have recorded there have been many, many deaths on the Sea of Galilee, fishermen who got caught in one of these very abrupt, sudden, and powerful storms. I've only been to Israel once. I was in Galilee. There were no storms, but I'm telling you, it's windy all the time, storm or no storm. And when I was there were no storms, but it was windy. I went up to one of the plateaus. There was a split rail fence. First, I sat on it, and I started to lean forward into the wind. And I could lean. I said, I'm going to try something. I got up on the split rail fence, standing on it, leaned forward. I don't know what the degree was. It felt like 45. But whatever the degree was, had there been no breeze, I would have fallen on my face. But it held me up, kind of like those guys that jump onto the cliffs with the sort of the chipmunk suits, and they fly. That's what I felt like, right? It was just holding me up, and that was just a normal breeze. Imagine a storm, and they drop down on the surface, and it says the boat was filling with water, and they were in real danger, as Luke records it. The disciples went and woke him up. Who's the him? Jesus. Master, not just one time, twice. Master, Master, we're going to drown. Now, if professional fishermen, which several of the disciples were, if professional fishermen conclude on the very waters that they make a living, that they know very well, storms they've seen before, if they're in the midst of a storm and the fishermen are afraid, and they say to Jesus, we're going to drown, you better believe it, you're doomed, right? If they say this is it and you're a fisherman on this lake, you know life has now come to an end. That's how fearful they were. The boat's going down, Jesus. So Jesus had no choice. They're shaking him. He wakes up. What does he do? He rebukes. He rebukes the wind and the raging waves. Instantly, the forces of nature submit to the voice of their creator. Suddenly, it says, the storm stopped and all was calm. Then he asked them, hey, you woke me up for this? Where's your faith? Where's your faith? What's Jesus' point? His point is this. We're in this boat because I said, let's get in the boat. And I said, let's get in the boat so that what? We go to the other side. If I tell you my intention is to get in the boat and, hey, let's go to the other side, don't you think I'm going to make sure we get there? Where's your faith? I told you, let's go to the other side. And I don't know what Jesus did. I imagine now that the waves are completely gone, he probably grabbed his blanket and went back to sleep. But the disciples, they didn't go back to sleep. They're still soaking wet from the waves coming over the sides of the boat. They look out, and it looks like you could ice skate on that water. It was placid. Is that the right word? Completely calm. They look at each other. Who is this guy? Now, they know he's Jesus, and they've already embraced him as the Messiah. But what this underscores is that there's this progressive, deepening understanding, not only of his identity, but because of who he is, what it is that he can do. And they continue, time after time, to be amazed. Who is this guy? Well, that question of the disciples is really the key central question in the entire Gospel of Luke. The more Jesus says, the more Jesus does, the more people begin to say, who is this guy? Who is he? Nobody speaks with this type of wisdom. Nobody speaks with this type of authority. Nobody can say to a storm, especially one on the Sea of Galilee, to knock it off, and it calms down instantly. It didn't fade into peacefulness. The waters in the Sea of Galilee heard the voice of their Creator, and they had no choice. They obeyed instantly. So who is this man? I don't know how you would answer that question about Jesus. I hope that you know he is the Son of God, that he loves you, wants a relationship with you, that he cares about you. He lived a sinless life. That's unique. He spoke with wisdom and insights, which even the religious scholars of the day couldn't compete or contend. That's unique. He not only spoke with authority, he exercised it over nature, and that too is unique. I like what theologian R.C. Sproul explains. He says that Jesus is the epitome of what scholars call, and here's the fancy Latin term, sui generis. Don't remember the term, but remember the definition. It means something that is in a class by itself. In fact, Jesus is. So now we see him not just preaching with power and authority, but behaving with power and authority. And it's not the first time, but Luke decides in chapter 8 to record 3 successive expressions of authority and power that go beyond the spoken word. In other words, are things that he does, uses the spoken word, but how Jesus engages with the variety of life. The first part being, as I said, over the natural realm. Number 2, Jesus now expresses authority and power over the spiritual realm. Picking up right where we left off, verse 26, so they arrived in the region of the Gerasenes. That was that town I mentioned right across the lake. Now, that's where they were going, right? This episode of the storm just happened to occur as they were going across. Well, now they finally accomplished their plan. Jesus said, let's go to the other side. Now they land on the other side. It's across the lake from Galilee, or on the opposite side. Verse 27, as Jesus was climbing out of the boat, a man who was possessed by demons came out to meet him. For a long time, he'd been homeless and been naked, living in the tombs outside the town. Okay, a few things to note. Luke tells us the man was possessed by demons. The Bible reflects very clearly demonic forces are real. This is not some example of a man with a mental illness or a man having a psychic episode. Had that been the case, if it had been mental illness or some sort of psychic episode or an emotional breakdown, right? And he ripped his clothes off and he's naked and he's doing all sorts of crazy things, Jesus would have related to the man the same way I would imagine he did the man with leprosy. He would have spoke healing to him. But Jesus doesn't speak healing right away. Jesus engages. He engages with the demonic forces that Jesus recognized are controlling this man. So, this is an expression of the very sinister nature of the very real and cosmic battle for the attention of men's hearts and minds, all orchestrated by Satan, who the Bible tells us from start to finish was expelled from heaven by God because he wanted God's authority and power. Having been expelled, he sees it as his life purpose to interfere with and diminish the quality of and distract the attention of all of humanity. Take away from God, if he can, what means most to God. And what means most to God? People. People mean the most to him. And so we are, whether we acknowledge it or not, or whether we see it or not, we are all engaged at some level in a spiritual battle. That's the nature of life on earth, this planet that we occupy. It'll be over someday, but it wasn't over then and it's not over now. So, the Bible tells us that Satan and those angels under his command have not ceased to wreak havoc with mankind and the world that we occupy. That's one thing. Secondly, this is quite obviously an extreme case of the demonic world getting involved with a human being. Just because you or I might not see such a case should not cause us to conclude that somehow Satan is not at work in the minds of humans in less dramatic, though equally sinister ways, because he is. Simply put, his nature is to oppose all things, as we said, related to God. I also like to say, though extreme, this episode is not an example of first century superstition, that they just believed in ghosts and goblins and demons and it was all superstition. No, it wasn't. Satan is behind every expression of evil born out on this battleground. The apostles John, Peter, and James, and Paul all wrote specifically about the reality of satanic warfare. So this is the point I want to stress. While there are people, as we see in this instance, who experience extreme degree or degrees of satanic attack and control, Satan's involvement in the life of humans, though in lesser ways, is commonplace. And we've talked about that in greater detail before. I don't want to unpack all the doctrine or theology of demons here, but we're talking about an instance, and I want to unpack at least a little bit. So, the Bible actually speaks of a spirit world, a mindset of this world. I like how Pastor Jack Hafer describes it. He says this: there is not anything that goes on in our culture, but in one way or another, the devil doesn't have his finger in the pot. He goes on to say the New Testament paints a picture of people being treated as if they're puppets, the strings of their lives being pulled more frequently than they even recognize by the works of hell that dominate little parts of their life: a spirit of pride, spirit of fear, spirit of hatred, spirits of anger, lust, murder, spirits of jealousy, greed. The strings are pulled and people behave according to the spirit of the world. And what's behind that spirit of the world? But the devil himself. Now, this is not to say that everybody in the world is demon-possessed, and we can look at what that means, but basically demon possession refers to a more dominant, pervasive control. But he's got influence and controls in other ways that maybe, as I just said, we're not always aware of. And don't miss this detail. The opposite side of the Sea of Galilee, who lived there? Jews? Maybe a couple. In Capernaum, in the region of Galilee on this side, just all Jewish, almost all Jewish. You come down, you cross over to Gadara, right? You've got Decapolis, Golan Heights. On this side, predominantly non-Jews, Gentiles. What did Jesus say? Who was the one that decided to go on this little 3-hour tour? It was Jesus. Let us, disciples, go to the other side. I love that Jesus wants to go where the non-Jew is, because he said countless times, I've come for all of humanity. And he's teaching the disciples that. So, as his boat lands on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, he's in Gentile territory, and Jesus is met by the demoniac. I mean, he barely has one leg over the front of the boat, right? He's going to step into the water, onto the sand, bring his trail leg out, and he's going to go walk up and do whatever he has planned to do. And I think he was going to go find this demoniac. Well, the demoniac found him. He's barely got one leg over the boat, and the demoniac is right there. He's right there. He sought Jesus out. Now, it says that he was from a town. Well, in the New American Standard, which is a little bit more literal translation at points, it actually says it was a city. So we know something about this guy. He wasn't from outside of town and sort of found himself living in the town, off on his own, naked in caves and tombs. He was from that town or from that city. We'll find out as we read. He was homeless, he was naked, and he lived in caves or in the tombs. So one has to wonder a little bit about this man. Was he married? If he was married, how long has he been under the domination of the demonic forces? Did his wife even know where he was? Did he have children? What were his kids' names? How old were they? How many did he have? Did they ever hope to see their father again? And clearly, people have given up on this guy. I mean, he's acting crazy, naked, running around. You'd probably give up on him too. So would I. But no one could be more alone than this man. So you've got to love the heart of Jesus. Let's go to the other side. There's someone there that needs us to be with him. So what does he say? As soon as he saw Jesus, he shrieked and fell down in front of him. Now, why did he come to begin with? I'm thinking, in all of his confusion, and all of the satanic puppetry, and his mind, I'm sure, is not clear, there was something in him that when he saw Jesus, in his spirit, he knew that was his chance for freedom. If I can just get there. But when he gets there, the demonic forces take over, and they start screaming out of his mouth. Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Please, I beg you, don't torture me. Now, isn't that interesting? Listen, in the same way that storm knew, that the water knew on the Sea of Galilee, when the creator of the universe says something, we have one option. We do it, and we do it immediately. So too does the spirit of the devil. These demons. I don't think they want to be close to Jesus, but the demoniac, in some moment of clarity, says, that's Jesus, I want to get there. They get there, they have one option. Stop, drop, and roll, right? Stop, drop, and beg. And that's what they do. They know who Jesus is. What do they call him? Son of the Most High God. This is the very thing that that Jesus is trying to get all of humanity to concede, to understand. Do you know that the demonic forces, they don't have faith? They don't have faith. They have complete knowledge of reality. They don't wonder if Jesus is God. They are confident that he is. Don't interfere with us, Son of the Most High God. They drop the man to Jesus' feet. Don't hurt us. Don't send us into the bottomless pit, is what they'll say, which is another term for the abyss, which is, as we find out from Scripture, and most particularly in the book of Revelation chapter 20, it is the final destination, the final imprisonment, the locale where God will send Satan and all the demonic forces. So what are they saying? We know what you can do to us. Don't send us there now. Don't send us there prematurely. We know we'll get sent there someday, but please don't send us there now. Give us some other place to inhabit, to infest, because they know their number's up with this guy. Jesus says, "What's your name?" Now, we don't know if he's asking the man that or if he's speaking directly to the demonic forces at that point, but it almost doesn't matter. The demonic forces are the ones that answer. "Legion," he replied, for he was filled with many demons. Now, a legion in the Roman army at this period of time would be a number of somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 Roman soldiers. Now, we can't necessarily conclude from that there were 4,000 to 6,000 demons inside of him, but clearly the name means something. And it's clear that it's demonic forces, not just one demon or fallen angel that has gained control of this man's life. This guy's a mess. This is an extreme case. "Legion," he replied, for he was filled with what? Many demons. Verse 31. The demons kept begging Jesus not to send them into the bottomless pit. Verse 32. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. The demons noticed the pigs. And so the demons begged him to let them enter into the pigs. So Jesus gave them permission. Verse 33. Then the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs. And the entire herd, having no clue as to what just hit them, plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned. Wow. They knew they'd get evicted. They knew exactly who Jesus was. They knew exactly what was going to happen. Stop, drop, and beg for mercy. Now, some people have taken offense that Jesus would send the demons into the pigs because the pigs lost their lives, right? And some have even said this is evidence that Jesus was sinful. Give me a break. What this is evidence of is the supreme value of a human life over and against and above, supremely, the animal kingdom. Everything on this earth was created to be the habitation for human beings. The crown of God's creation. Doesn't mean we abuse animals or we abuse the environment. We use it for the purposes God gave it to us for, and that would be a gift. But nonetheless, trees and pigs and all the rest are not as valuable to God as human beings, and he underscores it here. And by the way, Jesus didn't say, go get in the pigs. He conceded when they asked. Yeah, go ahead. But it underscores the reality that humans are the crown of creation. Verse 34, when the herdsmen saw it, they fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, the ones that lost their pigs, right? Spreading the news as they ran. Verse 35, people rushed out to see what happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus. Remember, he just got 1 foot out of the boat and the guy comes up to him, right? It's just the demoniac and all the demons that are talking to Jesus. The pigs go down in the water. The herdsmen say, hey! They run through town. You got to see what just happened. My pigs are gone. And this guy, you ought to see. And so now a crowd assembles down wherever that boat got parked. When the herdsmen saw it, they fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw who? They saw the man who'd been freed from the demons. What was he doing? He was sitting at the feet. Sitting at the feet, fully clothed. Apparently a disciple or Jesus gave him a robe, fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what had happened told the others how the demon-possessed man had been healed. Do you see what's happened here? Everybody said he was demon-possessed. They knew it. Now they see him, and everybody says he's not possessed. Now they see him, and they say he had been healed. They'd never seen something like this before. We've heard of this Jesus character, but we've never seen this. Who is this man? And where is the freed man? He's at his feet, at Jesus' feet. The great message here is nothing other than the authority and power of Jesus over the spiritual realm. We see it first on the sea over the natural realm. Now we see that the spiritual realm is subject to the commands of Jesus. So it says that as the word spread about what happened, so did fear. Why fear? I think it's a natural human response. When you see something that you've never seen before that's powerful. Remember, in a league by himself, right? There's no one who is like Jesus. He's a class, a league, completely by himself. And look at the power that he's exercising. Fear is a natural response. It says, verse 37, all the people in the region of the Gerasenes, they begged Jesus to go away and leave them alone, for a great wave of fear swept over them all. So what does Jesus do? He returned to the boat and left, crossing back to the other side of the lake. Now, what happened to the man who was at his feet? Verse 38 says, he begged Jesus that he would be able to go with him, but Jesus sent him home saying, no, go back to your family. It's been a long time since you've been with them. Go back to your family and tell them everything that some witch doctor has done for you. No. Tell them everything that God has done for you. So he went all through the town proclaiming the great things Jesus had done for him. Listen, when we have walked in darkness, whatever the reason might be, to whatever depth of darkness we've walked, and then we're set free from it, we no longer question the identity of Jesus. This man knew darkness. He then knew freedom. He then knew Jesus was God. He wanted to be with him. No, stay where you are. Stay where you are. He wasn't expelling him from a relationship with him, Jesus, that is. He just wanted him to become a testimony, a witness to what God had done. So they get back on the lake, in the boat on the lake. But it does raise a question for us, though. We who've been those that have received the love and the mercy and the grace, the forgiveness of Jesus, do we stick to our side of the lake? Do we stick to our side of the lake? People that are like us, right? Think like us, behave like us. Or are we willing, with the transformed life that we live, to go to the other side of the lake? In one version, it says the opposite side. In other words, the opposite end of the spectrum. You're over here, go to the other. Go to people unlike you. That's what Jesus is modeling for us. So we can't help but ask ourselves that question. When was the last time I went to someone who wasn't like me, didn't act like me, wasn't charming like me, didn't have interest in things like I have, I perceive as being very different? When was the last time I moved in their direction with grace and love and the message of Jesus' care for them? That's what Jesus did. So the question continues, who is this man? Who is this Jesus character? Some asked it with curiosity, some asked it with contempt and condescension. But it is the question that surfaces time and time again in Luke. Then thirdly, Jesus' authority, not only over the natural world, the spiritual world, but now you can say also over the biological world or the biological realm. Look what happens on the other side of the lake. Now listen, how do you know you're popular? Not in a superficial way, but how do you know that you have a following, right? I'll tell you how. Jesus shows us. He'd left, let's say Capernaum in the region of Galilee is on this side. He left this side of the lake, Jewish territory. He cruises across, gets rid of the storm. He's over here, Gentile territory. While he's over here freeing the demoniac, a crowd is already over there. You see, people knew when he left. We don't know where he's going, but we're going to wait for him because he's sure to come back. So while he's here with the demoniac, a crowd has gathered, a reception party, a waiting party, here back in the Galilean side. That's how you know you're popular. They wait for you. They wait for you. On the other side of the lake, the crowds welcome Jesus. Presumes they were there because they had been what? Waiting for him. Now it says it directly. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came and he fell at the feet of Jesus. Didn't we just read that? Who else fell at the feet of Jesus? The demoniac did. You can actually argue the disciples did too. Master, wake up. Come on, get up. But certainly we can say, because it's written by Luke, the demoniac fell at Jesus' feet. Now we read the same thing. Then a man named Jairus, a leader of the local synagogue, came to Jesus, fell at his feet, pleading with him to come home with him. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. As Jesus went with him, he was surrounded by the crowd. So again, he's barely got one leg out of the boat. And it's not a demoniac this time, it's the leader of the local synagogue, remember, back in Jewish territory. An important man. He drops, Jesus, I need you, my daughter is dying, and Jesus cares for people. So what does he do? He goes with the man. He goes with him. Talk about a crisis, my goodness. You have one child. Child is all but 12 years old. Not on a sick bed, on a deathbed. Little if no hope. But Jairus believes Jesus can heal him. It says a woman in the crowd. So now they're moving toward the house, right? Going toward Jairus' house. Jesus is willing to go. So it's Jesus and Jairus, right? No, it's Jesus and Jairus and all of his disciples. It's Jesus, Jairus, all of his disciples, and what? That crowd that had been waiting for him. And the crowd that grew. They're just moving en masse. Right? And Jairus is going to take him to his house. As they're moving, a woman who was in the crowd who had suffered for 12 years. Interesting. She'd suffered for as long as the age of that girl. For 12 years with constant bleeding, a hemorrhage, and she could find no cure. The inference there is she'd been trying. Every doctor she could talk to. Every sort of home remedy that would help. She attempted. She tried. Nothing worked. She found no cure. Verse 44, coming up behind Jesus, she touched the fringe of his robe, and immediately upon touching the fringe of his robe, her bleeding stopped. Her bleeding stopped. So they're moving toward Jairus' house. It's an urgent situation. And you can imagine Jairus, right? He's thinking, oh, okay, if I can just get Jesus there, this is great. We're moving. We're slow. There's a crowd, but we're moving. We're moving toward our house. And then all of a sudden, Jesus stops. The crowd stops. So Jairus has to stop. And a woman who couldn't quite get to Jesus' face is close enough that from behind him, she touches his robe. Who knows if she felt goosebumps or head to toe felt a warmth of healing over her body, but she was healed. Jesus felt something. He said he felt power go out of him, and that's why he said, time out. Who did that? Who touched me? Now he's determined. The woman knows it, so she can't hide any longer. I am, sir. I hope it's okay. Right? When the woman realized that she could not stay hidden in the crowd, she began to tremble and fell to her knees. That's interesting. The whole crowd heard her explain why she had touched him, and that she had been immediately healed. Daughter, he said to her, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Man, the demons fall at Jesus' feet. Later, when he's healed of the demonic control, the man who'd been demonized fell at Jesus' feet. Jairus sees Jesus. He drops to his feet before Jesus. This woman, now she's being addressed by Jesus. What happens? She drops to her knees at the foot of Jesus. It's a common theme in these episodes. But I wonder, in this episode, what must it have been like to be Jairus? You've already been undone emotionally by the illness, the fatal illness, right? This disease which is not being cured, that your daughter, your only child, is experiencing. You see Jesus, and there's just this little glimmer of hope. I bet if I could just get Jesus to her, just perhaps he'd be willing to heal her. And he's willing to walk with me. He said he'd come. And so you're moving Jesus along with this crowd to get to your house. But then everything stops because of a woman. And she wasn't dying. Now, 12 years, all right, she's sick, it's important. But Jesus, she didn't even have a number. I took a number. It was my turn. You're walking with me. Don't forget, why are you stopping? I mean, come on, don't you care for my daughter? You said you come. Come on, giddy up. Let's go. Move, crowd, move. He's got to get through. But he's not saying that because Jesus, he's ministering to this woman who's at his feet. It's the worst interruption at the worst time. Your desperation, right, as a father, it quickly becomes complete heartache and despair. Look what the next verse says. While he, Jesus, was speaking to her, he's still speaking, and that implies there's a conversation going on here. I mean, Jesus is not in a hurry all of a sudden. While he's still speaking to her, a messenger arrived from Jairus' home, coming the other direction, right? He told him, Jairus, listen, Jairus, your daughter just died. There's no use in troubling the teacher anymore. Complete despair. Jesus, you said you'd come. Why did you have to stop? But he did. But when Jesus had heard what had happened, that the girl had died, he said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith, and she'll be healed." When they arrived at the house, Jesus wouldn't let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, 3 of the disciples, and the little girl's father and mother. The house was filled with people weeping and wailing. Those were professional mourners, is what happened in the Jewish culture. But Jesus said to the professional mourners, "Would he knock it off? Your job's over. Get out." He's probably nicer than that, but essentially, shoo. Stop weeping. She isn't dead. She's only asleep. Asleep being a euphemism for death. But it's the type of death meaning it's going to come to an end because Jesus is there. Verse 53. But the crowd laughed at him because they all knew she had died. 54. Then Jesus took her by the hand and said in a loud voice, "My child, get up." And at that moment her life returned and she immediately stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were overwhelmed. Oh, really? That's an understatement. Overwhelmed. But Jesus insisted that they not tell anyone what had happened. Now, we could speculate as to why Jesus said to the demoniac, "Tell everybody," but he said to the parents, "Don't tell anybody." I have some thoughts, but we need to move on. If you want to know, we can talk later. How about that? I'm begging for conversation. But what do we see? Authority over the natural realm, authority over the spiritual realm, and now authority over human life, authority over the biological realm. Who is this man that can pull this off? Sui generis. He's in a class by himself. There's none like him. I hope you know that. Let's go back to verse 50 for a minute. But when Jesus heard what had happened, he said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith, and she will be healed." 3 words, simple ones at that. Just have faith. Don't you love those words when people share them with you? On the heels of you telling them what you're concerned about? You share something that it shakes you to your core, and they just have faith. Not necessarily the nicest words to have to hear, or at least not the most sensitive ones, you could say. But Jesus says it. Just have faith. Apparently, faith is something that we're to possess. We're supposed to have faith. But also, apparently, faith is something we're supposed to express. We're supposed to practice faith. And I don't know about you, but this whole subject of faith, it confounds me at times, I must confess. It does. I think to myself, what does faith really look like? What does it really look like? And when do I know that I have enough faith? Thinking that God's looking for a certain quantity of faith in me about whatever it is that troubles me in my life at that point in time. But not just a quantity of faith, a particular quality of faith, a pure faith, a faith that's not intermixed with doubt or concern or disbelief, God forbid. And so I think that way sometimes. What does real faith look like? To have faith, does that mean you are standing firm and you have no doubt whatsoever? And if you have any doubts, well, then you just don't have enough faith. Is that what that means? There are 2 significant issues, circumstances in my life that I face pretty much every day for the last almost 3 years. They're simply situations that if I could change 2 things, they'd be the 2 things I'd change right now. I'd change them in a minute, and you'd see a happy camper. And then there'd be something else, right? We all live that way. There's always something, oh, Lord, if I just pray you would work in this way and in that way. And so when I get up in the morning, I tend to think about those things because they're important to me. They're deep things, and the situation is not easy. And I'm not saying all this to focus my attention on me. I'm just bringing it up, hoping that maybe you can relate. I bet you can. It's those issues that, in order to really go about your day, you need to take those issues that concern you and weigh you down and almost shove them in a box and put them on a shelf. We call it compartmentalizing, right? Just to not be undone by the emotion that's attached in your life to those circumstances. And so I do that to varying degrees every day. I know what those 2 things are, and sometimes to get through the day, I'll just put them on the shelf. I'll go through the day, but I'll lay down in bed at night, whoop, there they are, front and center. I'm thinking about it, dwelling about it. And so when I face those circumstances that are very real and very much in my life today, I engage with God. And I say it again, God, what does it look like? What do you want to see in me, God, by way of faith that will convince you my faith is the right amount of quantity and the right amount of quality? What is it you really want to see so that perhaps by my faith then you'll respond in a way that I would like? Because I would like him to respond a certain way in these circumstances. Is this all foreign to you? You can relate, I'm assuming. And I know that I really don't ever just have faith. No matter how much of it I have or how sincere it is, I don't ever just only have faith. I have other emotions, doubts, concerns, fears. It's interesting that Jesus said to them, don't be afraid, just have faith. Well, God, I'm really good at fear. I'm really good at fear, and you know that. So I get myself all worked up, right? You call it the paralysis of analysis, right? And so I approach faith. You may not do this, but I do. I approach faith almost as this dialogue with God that's almost more academic. If I have the right quality of faith and the right quantity of faith, you add those two together, and the result is something that would be beautiful in my life, right? Or God's going to move. And so to me, it's a mathematical equation sometimes, and I'm coming to believe that faith isn't mathematical. It just isn't. Faith is thoroughly relational. And sometimes I approach God with a lot more of it than other times. And sometimes I just approach God with fear and tears. Maybe you do too. And I don't feel any faith. I just feel desperate. But this is what I'm learning. I haven't finished the lesson, but I'm learning. What if faith isn't about analyzing how much of it I have or how pure the supposed quality of my faith is or is not? What if faith is taking the heavy burdens and the fears and the circumstances that we wish would change? And what if it's just taking that whole baggage and doing what these people did? Drop to your feet. Not in fear. That's what the demons did. The others dropped in dependence and worship and praise and thankfulness and gratitude. That's how they end on their knees ultimately. And what if that's faith? Maybe the best synonym for faith is rest. Just come undone in his arms. What if it's rest? Forget the formulas, forget the keys, forget the comparisons to other people or the stories you hear. Just faith is falling into his arms. You can't control outcomes anyway. And what if it's just that closeness, that willingness to drop before him, whatever the circumstances are, that blesses him? It's not that you now have proven yourself to him. No, you're just blessing him because you realize you have nowhere else to go. And so you take him up on his offer to be with you, to care for you, and ultimately to do what is best in your life, even if on the short run it's not what you would hope for. What if that just blesses Jesus when we do that? To rest in him. That's what I'm learning. A lot of wonderful things happen in my life every day. I'm blessed beyond belief. The same can be true of anyone here. It can be true, and it is true of our entire community of faith here. But it's also the case that there are burdens, there's difficulties, even tragedies. Some people get sick and get sick for a long time. Some people get sick, they never get better, and they die. It happens in this church, happens in maybe your family. Here we have a resurrection from someone from the dead. Well, I haven't seen that happen here. It'll happen someday in the great resurrection. But what is faith? Dropping at his feet and resting. Dependence. Worship. So I would encourage you, do as that demonized man who was free did. Do what the hemorrhaging woman did. Drop at his feet. Who is this Jesus character? Who is he? Who is this guy? Well, he's God. He's God. And he cares for you. He cares for you. The band's going to come out right now, and as the band comes out, why don't you stand with me? We're going to sing a beautiful song. It's called I Am.